Welcome everyone. This is Denny with my YouTube channel. Why is this true? And it's been a long time since I've been here, but I'm back, and I this is kind of prompted because I got an email from YouTube said they were going to do something to my monetization status. I've never monetized any of my videos, but it kind of got me thinking about getting back to doing some interviews with a little bit different slant. And joining me today is Jason from back east. And so we live on different sides of the country here, but Jason is somebody who found Get Wisdom, and I'm primarily here to introduce him to you and let him tell you his story about his journey from wherever to Get Wisdom and what's that all about. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you especially Jason for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Denny. I appreciate the opportunity to tell my piece. Hopefully help inspire others and maybe get the word out there, because it's a pretty miraculous journey, and I think it's individual journey that we're all on, but it's heading toward the same destination.
Yeah. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, just like a really short bio, and then my next question after that would be how you found Get Wisdom, and
Sure.
And we'll go from there.
All right. Well, at the time of recording this, I'm 40 years old. I have 2 kids, a wife. I basically grew up in the automotive industry / photography and kind of media related stuff in that regard, but mostly automotive. By the time I hit about 20 years old, I was fighting a chronic illness. It was Crohn's disease. I come to find out a little later on. And that was a long battle. And from there, I ended up having major surgeries. I've had a big portion of my colon removed. I ended up having both of my hips replaced, several other things. But long story short, I've been through the ringer as far as Western medicine goes. I've gone clinical trials. I've done, I've seen the best doctors the country has to offer on the subject, and nothing was working. And with 2 young kids and a new family, and just fighting this for half my life, I was done messing around with what wasn't working. I wanted to start finding stuff that was working. That's kind of what slowly started my my truth search, my truth seeking, which led me down the road to Get Wisdom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were your interests prior, like when you say you were like truth, you're searching for truth, was it truth about health, medicine, or that kind of thing, or truth about human history, or what?
It's kind of a dynamic scenario. I mean, initially, yes, it was about looking for true healing. That's always been my overall goal, to find stuff that really works and is not something I have to take a pill every day. I mean, that's treating the symptoms at best. For instance, majority of the time I get on a medicine, it worked for several months, and then it stopped. And I'd have this huge fallout of my body trying to readapt to having all this chemicals and different poisons more or less in me. And then, I tried the next one, and so on and so forth. And it's just, it got to a point where I was seeing the proof in the pudding myself through my own experiences of how just something was missing. And it was like the elephant in the room that nobody talked about. And so that led, that kind of crossed over into other areas and other arenas. Everybody says, big pharma, you got this pitch. I'm like, okay, well, who's pulling the strings of big pharma, and where does this cross over into other arenas?
Okay.
And, it kind of, it led one rabbit hole to another. And then before you know, this big web starts to come out and dots start to connect. And that's kind of what's tied it together for me, is initially the search for the healing, the search for true health.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Oh, so what are the things were you looking at prior to discovering Get Wisdom, and how did you find Get Wisdom? Or do you remember? A lot of people don't remember how they found Get Wisdom.
No, I know who introduced me. I remember that.
Okay.
And it was I up until this point, like I had a Facebook and Instagram account and all that, and I did social media for my prior company that I worked for. I handled all their PR stuff, so I was burnt out on it for the most part. And then I saw just a lot of the BS that was going on at the time. I think it was 2018, 2019, and just a lot of the political unrest and just nonsense. And I deleted my Facebook, I deleted my Instagram. I'm like, this is all BS. I'm done. But I had a Twitter account that I opened like years ago. I never used Twitter. I'm like, I don't see the point in Twitter and Facebook and all these other accounts. And I'm just like, but it was there. And then I got to the point where I was looking for stuff, and they had a slightly different approach. This is way before now it is nowadays, where it's just they cranked up the censorship.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I was starting to find links to alternative news and things of that nature where it just
on Twitter.
I stopped. Yeah, on Twitter.
Okay.
And then I ended up finding this link. It was actually on Richard Byrd, Admiral Richard Byrd.
Oh, right.
And it was a channeling that Karl had done, and you had interviewed him on, and it was one of the Get Wisdom members had sent it as a link. He's like, check this out, because I was interested in Admiral Richard Byrd for one thing or the other, and I watched the interview. I from start to finish with the preamble, the actual channeling, and then the show wrap, and I try to do that for everything because it helps make everything cohesive. Mm-hmm. Even though there's some repetition, there's always new pieces to the puzzle. So anyways, I watched the interview, and I'm like, this has some merit here. I'm like, there's some stuff that is just ringing true, and that's kind of the other side of it is like I during this whole search on Twitter, I was looking at a bunch of other stuff and going here and there and everywhere else, and it's like you follow a lead for a while, then all of a sudden it just peters out. It's like I use the analogy, it was like a bloodhound on a search, and then all of a sudden the trail goes dead and he has to go somewhere else.
Yeah. And
that's kind of what narrowed down my search to get wisdom. Is I was going to all these other places, and I'm just like, this isn't adding up. A plus B isn't equaling C here. And so I just kept going until I found what resonated, connected the dots, made sense when you looked at it, taking a step back and seeing how this affects that. And it wasn't an overnight scenario. I mean, I was mainly looking at it for the healing side of things.
Okay.
I've always been open to the paranormal. That's been part of my family in one way or the other throughout my life. And so I've always been open to that. It's never been something that I've second guessed. Same with UFOs and things of that nature.
Okay, all right.
So that wasn't a big hurdle for me to come over. I'm like, when you step back and look at it, it makes sense. And it's like, just look at the grand scale of the galaxy, and think of how many millions of other solar systems are just in our galaxy, and then think of life, and when did that start? It doesn't necessarily start with us, and it clicked. It was just like, oh, everything was like an epiphany. And there were some roadblocks where I tried to poke holes in. I tried to find the flaws, the where stuff doesn't hold up, and every time that, especially once I found the database, I could start cross-referencing stuff and asking questions on keywords and things of that nature. It answered a lot of questions, and it helped me start to build the picture bigger. And another analogy I like to use is it's like a mosaic where you get one little chip. That's a story, that helps bring their piece to the overarching tapestry of life. And then you pan back, and then you start to see the bigger picture of what's going on, what's most pressing. And it took me a while to get there. And my biggest thing is like the benevolent alien scenario.
Okay.
There's so many beings out there. How can there not be any benevolent physical at the time? And the more and more I started to look at that and realize the reasons why, it made more sense. And it's pretty amazing.
So
the healing side of it.
So do you feel like the benevolent ET scenario that we hear in a lot of other arenas, was that something you were kind of sensitive to? Like that was the part that wasn't quite lining up for you initially, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing for me in that regard is it felt like it was just improbable, just out of the on it from a numerical standpoint.
So improbable that the only ETs in the physical form dealing with humans were negative. That was improbable?
Right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All
like
right.
there was no balancing force.
Okay, all right.
Um,
How was that resolved for you?
just when I start to, the biggest thing for me is trying to understand time in the non-linear fashion, which is hard.
Yeah.
Because it's there's an overlap, and when you start to realize that that's not something that they're beholden to, that they're restricted by, and well, neither is the divine for that matter, but they've mastered all, and they're so much older and have so much more experience and have had time to cut their teeth and figure all this stuff out. It just nobody has time to actually stop and think about it, and I never stop thinking. It's a double-edged sword on that whole arena, but people are so distracted by the responsibilities of the day-to-day lives, and then you got one of these things that's a constant, it's like a friggin' ball and chain that's stuck around you that you don't even know, and it's just like, what's that? Every 5 seconds. I just like walking around today. I had to go to a doctor's appointment, and everybody in the waiting room is just to their screens. It's just sad. It's not normal.
No, it's not normal. So one of the claims that my understanding of this is a barrier, one of the big barriers is that one of the claims from Get Wisdom is that there's no positive ETs in the physical, the 3D world that are interacting with humans on the Earth plane right now. So that's a claim that's kind of a unilateral, across the board claim. And I think when people hear that, they just run the other way. They go that's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. There's they've seen UFOs. They've heard all the the ET stories. They've heard both. They've both heard stories about ETs being benevolent, ETs being negative, and they're saying, okay, well, this is kind of a unilateral situation you're presenting to us here, and then they don't buy it. It just doesn't seem plausible to them because, and I get this too because I was this way too, and I actually had to kind of go back and do some more research after I met Karl. We started learning all this stuff, and so how was that resolved for you? I mean, how do you say, okay, well, these guys are probably or not, or Karl's allegedly channeling creators and the beings and people who have died and passed on and gone on to light are telling us that negative ETs are running the world. So, I mean, given that there's all these positive ETs out there, why is it the way it is? I mean, why is this story acceptable to you? Why don't you reject it like most people do?
That's the big stopgap. Well, for me, it was the healing that really bridged that gap in disbelief for me, or not. I guess it would be a gap in disbelief. It's because for me, I was experiencing firsthand real healing for what felt like the first time, through doing the LHP and learning the prayers and learning how to basically cultivate that relationship with the divine and creator and things of that nature. And I came from a agnostic background, so I was never a churchgoer. My dad was Protestant, but it was never something that was pushed on me. I always felt uncomfortable in churches and things of that nature, but I was never, the idea of existence outside of our dimensions or realms, however you want to look at it, always made sense to me, and the way energy works and things of that nature. I'd always had a big interest in quantum physics as well, so this is, again, it's tying everything together, where I might not understand certain aspects of some of the material when I was starting out, but there was enough other material I had a pretty good grasp of that it enabled me to really deep dive into it, and then that helped lateral over, and you got some crossover where it started to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Okay.
And for me, just when you start to look at it, the healing itself and how I'm like, this is working. It's not some placebo effect. It's really working. So there's something.
And how did you come to that conclusion? How did you say, okay, this is not placebo, this is really working? What was your discernment around that? How did you come to that conclusion?
Sure. So I'll have to give you a little back history to give you context.
Okay.
So at the end of 2019, my life was kind of crashing. I had a dream job. The people I worked for were amazing. They were wonderful, but it was running me down health-wise. So I ended that chapter in my life, and I took a step back and stopped working. This was after the summer my father had passed away after a 14-year battle with cancer. My marriage was on the rocks for no reason, like no logical reason, like with all these things coming to a head. It's not like one of us had cheated on one or the other or anything like that. It was just a lot of anger and whatever. So at that point, my Crohn's was flaring hard. I was just going through the ringer with that. I was having a hard time walking. I basically had to have an infusion once a month just to be able to walk. And it just, I got down to, I'm about 172-ish pounds now. I got down to like 120, and I was losing like 5 pounds every couple days at my worst. So it got to a point where I was just, all these pieces, my house was coming crashing down. And I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. We had done marriage counseling and other things like this. And at the same time, I'm getting ready to do clinical trials down in Boston. And so this is the end of 2019, before the pandemic really sets in. I had started the clinical trials, been going down there for a couple weeks. And in the meantime, I had to get off all of my meds for like 4 to 6 weeks prior to get it out of my system. So in the meantime, I'm unmedicated, full of pain, full of just basically walking torture. And I'm going down there for the clinical trial. It's about a 33% chance I'll get the placebo, with a higher percentage of actually getting the medicine for the clinical trial. And lo and behold, I was getting the placebo. I'm like, I know I am. I verified it with the doctors. I'm like, I got to get something like a little bit of prednisone or something to just get me through to because if you're in the clinical trial for X amount of weeks, then they'll start giving you the real medicine regardless. They just want a blind start. Anyways,
okay.
So I basically got to the point I discovered that I was on the placebo. There was no point in continuing on. I would have had to do it for like another 5 weeks. This is when COVID was really starting to become pronounced.
Okay.
And widespread. And I'm like, I was listening to that little voice in my head, and I was like, nope, something doesn't add up. And from then on is when I really started to, that's actually when I started to get wisdom and things of that nature. And I'm like, there's other healing modalities out there that have to work. And I also found, CDS, which is a whole nother thing that I do in conjunction for just general health, and that's immense as well.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you found Get Wisdom, and then the healing, your experience with the healing helped you be more accepted of the claim about the negative ET. So what was your healing experience with Get Wisdom? Did you pay for a session, or what did you do?
No, what I did is I saw the value. I watched a few of the videos. I saw the value in becoming a light worker healing protocol practitioner.
Okay.
So, I saw that the LHP manual was there. I purchased it, and I got the manual. I started reading the PDF I ended up printed that off, and that took a lot for me to get through. And as you can see, I got a lot of books I like to read, and it took me a while to get through. It's like every time I go to sit down, there's some distraction. Something was going on. I get like 5 pages, and then my dog's jumping up, and they just laying in the pond down the road, and it's just now they're laying on my book. Things like that. But once I started, and I also did some. So
excuse me for interrupting, but you actually bought the course before you got a session done for yourself. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty unusual.
Is it?
Yeah, because most people, they go, well, I'm going to try this, and if it works, and then I'll get the book. and now become a practitioner themselves. We're fortunate in that a high percentage of our clients end up becoming practitioners, but the usual course to that event is that they get the session done first. So you're a little anomalous in that regard because you just went ahead and got the course. That's cool. Yeah.
Well, I saw a lot of the channelings, and then for like 6 months after I got I first bought the course, and then I got the manual and stuff like that. I didn't even know that there was like all these other webinars and things besides like the channeling interviews. And then I'm like, oh, this is like a treasure trove. And so I started listening and watching all those, and it really helped deepen my understanding for a lot of it. And I'm the kind of guy that when I find something that I'm passionate about, I dive in with both feet. I've got burnt doing that in the past, but this just felt right. After seeing a bunch of the channeling interviews, understanding what they're talking about, how karma works, especially karma in my sense, and that's where I felt that a lot of the healing came from. It's just felt like a huge weight was lifted. And at one point, I got to where I felt like I was 17 years old again. Like the pain was gone. I felt like I could run a mile at top speed. I could physically stand up and feel my vertebrae go click, 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 click. And another prognosis I had was ankylosing spondylitis, which is all lower back fusing and stuff like that. And I'm just like, this is amazing. And it didn't last. Don't get me wrong. It was like a preview of like, okay, you're on the right track, but you got a lot more work to do.
So, and this healing, this experience you had of feeling young, that was a result of you doing a session for yourself?
Yeah, that was the result of doing sessions for myself and then asking others to help as well.
Okay.
Having a session done on like the forums.
Okay.
And that's a really good asset to have.
Okay.
And just a lot of support.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was in a unique scenario where I wasn't having to go to work every day.
Yeah.
This is, during 2020, so I'm home, and I was able to really dive deep into this and give it a lot to do, and do justice, I should say. And it helped. And I would get to the point where I wasn't sleeping at night anyway, so this is what I do. I'd do the materials, or I'd watch the channeling, or I'd try to wrap my brain about some certain subject that was being discussed, things of that nature.
Yeah.
But the healing's really what set it off for me, and the understanding of the belief quotient and how that plays into things as well. Because I've had my ups and downs, but overall it's been going up.
Okay.
As far as my health. I mean, I've been off meds, all meds, and I've been on some form of meds for over 20 years. I've been off all pharmaceuticals for well over a year. Now, I had a bout where I had a bit of Lyme disease last year, around this time actually, and I was doing LHPs for that, and I got done my course of meds, which was for like a month, and I haven't had any repercussions since then. Just gone as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. So as a result of the healing, it gave credibility to the other information that was being presented, one of which is this whole negative ET thing.
Yes. And that's what took me the longest time to build my belief up over and understanding on okay, how this makes sense. How is it that there's basically three main players that rule our entire galaxy, and we're kind of like the last hurrah to see if there's any way to salvage this. It's like the biggest underdog story I've ever told.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty...
It's outlandish, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of like... It kind of beats fiction, and so which makes it even... It's harder to digest because it just seems kind of ludicrous, I think, in some ways. I could see how people would think that.
Right. And I get that, and it's just like... I ask myself if I'm crazy sometimes, but then I'm like, crazy people don't ask themselves if they're crazy. And it's not because... But it's more of the... it's so, the more you actually learn about it, it's the harder it is to even broach the subject with somebody that's completely off their radar as far as what they would be willing to accept for reality. And it makes it hard. But then you find that one person where it's just like, okay, this makes sense, and you're like, all right, now we can talk a little more and flesh this out.
So you've run into people in your personal circle where they're willing to listen to what you've learned. Is that true? Yeah, it is? Okay. So my experience is that's pretty rare.
Yeah. And I've been fortunate enough that my wife is basically where I am as far as the way we think in understanding of things. My mother-in-law is, my mom to a certain extent, but it's like...
Have they noticed changes in you? As your wife notices changes in you? Okay.
And that's partly why she's at the belief quotient that she is, because she's seen the changes. She's been with me in the trenches when it was sucked.
Yeah.
And when I don't want to get into gruesome details, but she's been with me through the worst of it, and she's seeing me in the best of it now. And she was of the same volition that I was, agnostic, very science background, and now she's like, I got her saying prayers at night, which never would have been on the spectrum of possibilities. And it's not like it's not a, oh, I'm going to do my prayers. It's she sees a benefit in it and a value, and our kids do too. They sleep better.
Wow.
So.
I'm like I've told people like who are starting out with the LHP, I say, if you're kind of like a little not ambivalent, but a little unsure about efficacy and LHP, I said, work on animals, locations, and children. And you kind of use those besides yourself. My first suggestion is do the LHP on yourself, and then after that, you can work on those. And a lot of times, it's a pretty quick feedback as to like, wow, something's happening here. But it must be especially heartwarming and wonderful to see it in your own kids. I can only imagine what that must be like. It's kind of a big deal.
Really. It's really amazing, and some of the conversations that just come out of left field with my kids, and like, they have conversations with, God is how they refer to it as, and at night the prayer we did initially was, highest power of the universe, the nightly prayer, and we added a couple, like one stance to it, and but they memorize that, and now whenever they go to the end of the prayer, then they say, and to add to the prayer, and then they do all, we've been teaching them to make it more empowered, to add repetition and things like that.
Okay.
And but they'll have specifics, like if something happened in that day, or
right,
Rose got what's my dog got into a porcupine the other day, so
oh,
we say a prayer for her. So.
Oh,
she's fine now. Okay,
good. Yeah, I've seen pictures of that. Yeah. Okay. All right, so what kind of okay, so you've had some success in like one-on-one with people, and you do bring up the negative ET thing, like, so how did that go? I mean, what what were you able to say that kind of like opened the doors, if you will, or?
Well, a lot of it is even just the premise of, does this person believe in ETs or not, or of the possibility of extraterrestrials in general.
Yeah.
And in both cases, for my mother-in-law and my mom and my wife is all yes. My mother-in-law and my mother both swear that they had sightings when they were younger.
Okay.
So that's like it left open the window for possibility years and years later.
Okay.
And my wife's kind of the same, thinking I was, where there's millions of other solar systems in our galaxy. It's just a numbers thing at that point.
Were those experiences for them positive or neutral or negative?
I'd say kind of more neutral-ish, more of nothing negative, nothing like an abduction, at least
Okay.
that they recall, but more of a sighting. They were with other people when it happened, so it wasn't like it was only them type scenario.
Okay.
And it's more of like, oh, I saw something in the sky. It was hovering there for a while, or it was hovering above us, and then it kind of went away.
Yeah.
That was about. It was more of, hey, we're real, and see you later. But this is back in the 70s and early 80s. So
Yeah.
well before.
So what do you think?
Smartphones
What do you
everywhere.
think made them open to the idea that the ETs that are interacting with humans are all negative?
Well, I mean, part of it was just everybody thinks of the man pulling the strings, or the unseen hand, the puppeteer, so to say, or how they say, and it's just a matter of going to the top of that, the pile, top of the pyramid, to where it all leads back to one thing, and who's ultimately in control. And that's where you get talking about. It's obviously the politicians, and in a lot of aspects they're just figureheads for certain things. And this is apparent to them when I'm talking. So it gives a frame of reference. I'm like, so okay, who's controlling them? Who's pulling their strings? And then lead it back to so on and so forth.
Okay.
And
so do you think that idea is more palatable? Because I mean, sometimes I think that most people just, I mean, they'll talk about a secret government or like the Illuminati or the Cabal or something like that, but it's still kind of like a human phenomenon, and like, and
Right.
to take it beyond that is where the barriers come up really solid, like, or the ETs are demons, and it's just like this. Right. It goes from like, well, that's kind of plausible, to something that's just like not even worth considering. And
well, it's because it goes from a state of I can see it, touch it, feel it, interact with it, to almost pure theory, because there is so little proof out there without really looking for it.
Yeah.
And then you add the programming on top of it, where it's just instantly in one ear and out the other. And I think you're up against a pretty big barrier. And like you said, when you get to it, they make it so it's believable, so it's just human level. And then you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, let's expand our view again. It's that mosaic pullback, and to get the bigger picture. And some people just, I don't think they can wrap their heads around that scale. It's like when you see, I don't know if you've ever seen those videos of like where it shows a scale of Earth against Sun, and then it goes to like the biggest
right.
sun in the universe, and it's just like it's like trying to think of yourself in the quantum level as like a cell, and then expand yourself to a universe. It's like it's hard to wrap your head around that much scale.
Right.
And I think that's a big barrier for a lot of people, where it's just like, okay, I've seen humans, I know humans exist, there's history on humans, and then now it's a level of belief that you're asking people to have without any quote unquote proof.
Yeah. So based on your experience, it sounds like maybe the healing aspect of what Get Wisdom has to offer may be the most productive arena. I mean, rather than trying to do the hidden truth aspect,
Right.
And
that's 100% true, and that's been I'm like, I can't prove to you what you believe or not believe, but I can show you my story, and I have eyewitness accounts for the history of what I've been through, and I'm telling you point blank, you can take it for what it is, that this has worked, and it's continuing to work, and it's getting better, not worse. And it's something that I'm hoping will inspire someone enough to take that leap of faith and try it for themselves, because it's really something you need to experience. And that's life. It's like you need to experience life to truly understand something. There's only so much theory can do, or someone telling their story can do.
Yeah, book learning and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta take the step at some point, for good or worse.
So, was there some? Okay, so one of the things that I've encountered from time to time is people have a picture in their mind or an idea, or or a vision of like, okay, this is what it feels like to be healed, or this is what gonna happen when I get healed, or when this gets fixed, and then they start doing this, and then something else happens that they really weren't expecting, but it falls into that category of healing, but it wasn't what they would imagine. Is it? Have you had that experience too, or has it been pretty much?
It's really, I've had so many issues. It's hard to describe. I'm trying to cite an example that I can think of, but the biggest thing for me is walking. That's been like, I'm walking and I don't have extreme pain through my legs and my back, and I can stand up straight. And now that I've eliminated this stuff, it's like a brain fog is lifted too, and that's a huge part of it that I'd say was probably the unasked for side effect, but a positive side effect.
All right.
Where it's like, now that I'm not looking through this haze, I can see where I was self-inflicting myself doing this or that, with bad foods or things of that nature.
Yeah.
And that only helped the healing accelerate. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Where I'm not, constantly sticking my finger in the socket while I'm trying.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me it was like I always pictured like a sequence of things, or for something to get healed, I had to go through some kind of like dark night of the soul, or there'd be gnashing of teeth, crying, or I'd have to go through some kind of awful experience to come out on the other side. And then the thing I found out was that not only for me but for other people, the Creator and the divine realm is very gentle. They know how to put things. They know how to put things in order, so you don't have to eat the whole elephant. And we can work on this, and then we move over to that. And then I found, not in all areas, but in a lot of areas, that I go, wow, this is healed, but it's not what I was expecting at all. This is quite different than what I was expecting. And it was like a pleasant surprise, like, oh, that wasn't so bad, or whatever.
Right. And to me, I like to think of it as like the artist meets the engineer, and it's like this dance is done. And one of the things that made me think of while you were talking about that is, got this friend that had, they're very into shamanistic healing, and they're open to karma and a lot of the understanding, so they have a decent grasp. And she was talking about how she had her house cleared and things of this nature and that nature. She knows what I do to a slight extent, not to the nitty gritties of everything that I go through, but she knows what I do.
And you're talking about the LHP. When you say what I do?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Yes, sorry, yes, when I do the LHP, light work healing stuff. So she was talking about how she had a shaman friend come and clear her house after her father had passed away, and he was living in in-law part of the house, and the house is old, it's like 1800s. And there was some past karma there, and she ended up like dropping on the floor and having these like attacks when she was taking the cording off from her and things of that nature. And it's like, I don't doubt that she was doing this, but in my back of my head I was saying, it just shows what kind of elegance and finesse and consideration the divine takes in the healing aspect, where they'll probably do the same amount of healing and then some. It might take a little longer, but it's going to be much more profound and lasting.
Mm-hmm. And the perpetrator gets healed.
Yes, exactly. So you're breaking the cycle. That's the big thing. It's like this. People don't understand that they're on this like circle going around and around. It's like a record. Eventually, you got to step off to do something different. Otherwise, you're just going to keep repeating the same thing over and over. And I plant seeds here and there for certain people that I know will be receptive to it, and then we've really hit it off and we're able to have some good, meaningful conversations. So
it takes a lot of patience.
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
So the other thing that I know you've experienced is this whole, which is kind of like a spin-off of Get Wisdom, is the deep subconscious channeling trauma resolution. You had a lot of work done in that area.
Yes.
probably as much or more than most people who have had any kind of exposure to this. So you kind of like on the receiving end, you've got quite a bit of experience, not only for yourself, but family members.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've done dozens and dozens of sessions for myself and for my family. And it's been probably some of the most amazing bits of healing that I've ever experienced. And this is something that, like, I wake up the next day or later that night, and you get a lot of synchronicities. And again, it's those little personal miracles that you'd have to explain so much context for other people to even get an inkling of what you're talking about.
Right.
And it's been really, I see the value in it. And I'm like, people will spend $3,000 at for a hospital visit or bill or a doctor visit or anything like that, and it's just expected that you pay that, or that people are paying every month for this insurance to help pay. And I'm like, I see the value in spending some of this money that may or may not help me when I've seen benefits from the LHP. And then this new stuff, I'm like, this makes sense to me. And if it makes sense to me, I'll try it. And I started doing some of the sessions, and I was just like, this has merit. This is going somewhere. This has legs, and it's going to start walking on its own.
Yeah.
And it's really one of those things. It's so profound, but it's so hard to put into words until you can experience it.
So do me a favor and describe to our listeners what deep subconscious trauma resolution is. I mean, I can do it. I do it all the time. But I'd like you to talk about it because you're very much on the receiving end. And okay. So,
and again, this is where I do a deep dive in, and part of it is understanding consciousness, and that was another key factor that brought all this together, and understanding how many different levels of consciousness there are. And when you go to the deep subconscious, which ends up being the vast majority of what makes up our own consciousness, that's where we're getting to the root cause of all of these concerns, all of these, for me, it was my chronic health issues. You get certain milestones in your life, and then this karma reappears, or the energies get to a certain level, and it's like, all right, let's see what they do this time. And this enables you to go deep into the mind, where all of these memories or access to the energetic links where it happened in past, present, future, other parallels of time, it's all on registry. So they can go in there, they can pull up to see what the divine can, to see what needs to be addressed. I could be upset because, my back hurts all the time. I have no idea why. It could have been from many, many past trauma events, and that's typically the case. And they can go, when I say the divine can go in with like a channeler and someone to help facilitate it and address these issues. And the fact that I've had so many of these done, I've seen it where it was, a year plus ago and where they are now, and I've got to see the evolution of how this has come together and how it started. And some people want the gory details, and it's just like, at the end of the day, it might do more harm than good to know these things for the majority of people. And but at the same time, the caveat I found is to get some sort of feedback from creator. It almost helps, like, especially if you listen to them. Like, I've had my wife do many sessions. She listened to like 2, and then she's like, nope, she forwards them all to me. And she's like, I'm better off not knowing. And I'm like, well, I'm proud of you for realizing that, because there are many people that aren't.
Yeah.
And it's just, it basically goes into the deep subconscious, pulls up this traumatic issue, brings up a new, basically, scenario where you change the energetic signature of what happens. You help bring healing to all the people that are involved, throughout all of time. And then that helps change it, and it helps move on. It helps actually bring healing, and it's almost like for me, I can feel like you've scuba dived before, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's that buoyancy feeling of like when you're down below and you're starting to rise up and you're getting close to that surface and you just feel the bladder start to expand more and more and you kind of pop up at the surface. That's almost what it feels like sometimes when after I've had one of these sessions done, and then it says, how many people were involved, and it's arbitrary to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But when they say it's 60 plus people, and then or 100 people,
former selves,
8 people, former selves that have had this experience, and it's just like you've been carrying around this baggage for who knows how long, and then you finally got to a point where you got real healing. You're moving on, and it's just like that's the best way. It just feels like a bobber in the water. You just pop up, and it just feels so much more uplifted and like, all right, let's see what we can do again on the next time. It's really amazing, and it's science beats around the bush a little bit with consciousness in general, and that's like the big kicker: consciousness and karma. You start adding those two things in, and you can figure out a lot in time.
Yeah.
It really starts to put the pieces together, and that's to me where it starts to have cohesion, where everything starts to gel.
Yeah.
And it gives understanding for something that I didn't see a connection to, 3 months ago, but now it's like, all right, I've seen it from enough perspective.
Yeah, I was gonna just say that you read my mind. So what about the belief work in this whole process? What about? Can you talk a little bit about that too?
Sure. Now that's been a hard road.
But that's part of this deep subconscious channeling thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that helps. And this is where you get to be kind of put on your critical thinking and try to think a little more creatively, because the divine will never lead. They will only basically do what you ask of them. So when you start asking for certain things to be healed that maybe other people wouldn't really think of, like I've had belief quotient done as a healing, limiting beliefs, other things of that nature, anything, obstacles that might be inhibiting the divine from doing further work and things of that nature. And it's once you start looking at it from trying to find the loopholes, almost kind of how I look at it. And let's see how far we can stretch this. And then it opens up into new territories. And then that's, for me, like the belief quotient went through the roof on certain things. And I had setbacks at some points where I had this weird surgery I had to have last year. And before I went into anesthesia, I just had this gut feeling. I'm like, this is going to destroy my belief quotient. I don't know why, but I almost walked away from Get Wisdom after I came out of that. It was just like this epiphany I had before I went under. And but I came out so much stronger in my belief quotient after I I slogged through it. And again, it was a kind of scenario. I'm like, this is illogical for me to just dismiss everything, because I've seen the benefits. I've seen so much proof of it working. And then I just kind of pushed through it, and that's when I leaned on others for some help. Yeah, on the forums,
on the belief work, the thing that I was referring to is like, so as part of the deep subconscious channeling trauma resolution, we find out that through all these collection of traumas, there's certain beliefs that crop up, and they just reside in the client's deep subconscious. So, like, I'm not worth, life is too hard. I'm not worth, care, love, acceptance. I'm being judged unfairly by everybody. And there's a collection of beliefs that come as a result of these traumas that have never been healed. And so, as part of this process,
that wasn't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So part of this process is we ask, now that you got rid of all these feelings, is there a new belief that you have about life? And then invariably the client's deep subconscious will go, 180 degrees, the complete opposite, and say, I'm worth healing, I'm da-da-da. And it's a whole series of positive beliefs that almost replace everything on a one-for-one perspective. And then those beliefs are like instilled back into the client's deep subconscious. And I think that's part of the process that's a little bit more variable. It's more of a variable because, I think from client to client, that's going to stick in. It depends how many sessions they've done. What their karmic background is, how in touch they are with their own deep subconscious. The fact is that most of us are completely separate. Well, not most of us. All of us are separate from our deep subconscious to a huge extent, such that normal hypnosis won't even get there. You won't get there. The only way you can get to the client's deep subconscious is through a channeler who has the divine realm assist them in doing that. If the divine realm's not there, it ain't happening. And if you think it is happening without them, it's probably not an Anunnaki psychic. That's what we found out.
And exactly, and that's like you start wanting to cut corners, and then there's certain things you've got to do in the protocol to uphold accuracy and safety.
Yeah.
And
so what I want to ask you is that you've had quite a few sessions done compared to your average person. I mean, and actually, if you look at everyone who's had this done, it's an infinitesimally small number of people.
Yeah.
It just is. There's only 3 groups of people that I know that are doing this on a somewhat consistent basis. And that's Karl and Ollie, me and Helen, and then Lance and Tomar, and sometimes Karen, and I think Karen. I don't know if Karen's worked with Tomar yet or not, but I know she's worked a few times with Helen, and that's it. So, and we don't do any advertising. It's all word of mouth, and it's primarily LHP's practitioners or students, that are coming for this. But that's changing slowly. That's changing.
Yep.
But the belief work is potentially going to be quite profound, but I don't think it's going to really kick in just with a few sessions. So you're in a minority of people who've had numerous sessions, and so I was curious.
And my belief quotient is pretty high, I'd say.
Well, I'm not talking about belief quotient now. I'm talking about the replacement of beliefs that came about from the trauma. So you had all these traumas, you had beliefs that resulted from them, and now the beliefs about how to live your life, right?
The caveat for me is that a lot of my sessions, it weren't really beliefs in myself, or it wasn't belittlements of mine. Mine have been mainly targeted around my belief in the divine and understanding of God.
Oh.
So that's actually been a huge...
Okay, so you went from like non-belief in the divine to more belief in the divine, and that's the belief work that was addressed in the sessions, you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in all honesty, and that was a lot of, well, getting into too many specifics, but it was a reoccurring theme that came up in a lot of healing, and it was more or less of, you can basically relax now. You found the divine again, more or less, and you're safe. You're doing this in a safe manner, and their trust is well founded now. Where in the past, we've had a lot of these. I've been a healer in a lot of previous lives, and I've had a lot of trauma, as I'm sure many other healers have as well, as a result of trying to help people.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of it's been centered around that, and to me, again, it's a feeling that it's hard to put into words, but that has been one thing that's been really quick as far as noticeable difference for me on a mental state. I guess is the best way I can describe it. Mental emotional state is it just feels more stable. It feels more concrete, more sure, more right. If that makes sense. No wishy-washiness. The confidence level is high. The I don't know. Patience is there.
Yeah. So going forward, like what's on the front burner for you right now, like with all of this?
Well, right now is basically I had been working on my teacher certification.
Right. For LHP.
Yes, for LHP. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's something that is a goal of mine. The other side of it is I'm working on becoming an uncorrupted channeler.
Okay.
And that is something that I'm working on slowly. With life, it makes it slow, especially with two younger children. And but that I've done enough work in the area where there's some confidence there and there's some reassurances, and that's kind of my main focus right now. I've shifted from I still plan on doing teacher certificates, certification. Sorry.
Yeah,
because I see value in this, and I want other people to experience it and be responsible for their own lives as much as they can, because it's really hard in this world. And this is an opportunity for people to be able to take charge a little more or more control of their own sovereignty. And I want to give that to other people.
Yeah.
And channeling side of things is another way for me to help bring that out in other ways with the DSC work, the deep subconscious channeling work.
Yeah, because that's going to be the bottleneck.
Yes.
I mean, if this ever catches on, the big holdback is going to be, well, we don't have any channelers.
Right. And that to me, like between the LHP and then the targeted DSC work, it's like the 1-2 Hail Mary. It is so powerful and profound, and not have more people have access to this that's gonna, like you said, it's the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And that's my goal, and I'll get there, and it's just a matter of not being so down on myself, because I don't necessarily always.
Yeah, and you need the time too. Yeah, it's hard for people to carve that out, especially if you have a family.
Yep.
And so it's but the rewards are potentially huge, because you'll be in demand. I know with Helen and I, we started in January of last year, and it's almost been consistent 9 sessions per week, and then sometimes where we're up to, like, for a while there, I think we were about 6 weeks behind, and now we're like about 3 weeks behind. I mean, in terms of like somebody placing an order and us getting a session done, it's running about a 3-week lag right now, and we don't do any advertising. We don't advertise. I mean, it's a little bit. I mean, because I have a website now, but it's not like I haven't hired an SEO company or anything like that. So most of it's still word of mouth, client referrals. We get a lot of the stuff referrals through Get Wisdom, and then in my work, I refer back to Get Wisdom for LHP work. So, and so that's where it starts, is the LHP, and I liken that to clean up your living room before you invite guests over, and then once you've done the LHP. Then you could do the deep subconscious channeling, and I loved it. I love that part of it. And for the facilitators, the people who are doing that work, the guy who teaches holographic memory resolution, Brent Baum, has got an online course now. So if somebody wants to be on the facilitator side of things, which is what I do, what Lance does, what Karen does, and what Ollie does, you can learn that online from Brent now. And I think it's probably conceivable that you could learn it from the material that Karl, myself, and Helen have, and Lance too. Lance is particularly good at. I mean, a lot of the improvements in the process have been largely a cooperative effort between him and Karl. I have to, give credit where credit's due. I mean, there's been other contributions and stuff, but he's the guy who's really drilled down on this. He has a lot of passion for it, and it comes out, and it's very nice to see. It's nice to see that level of passion again. I guess, people get so drummed down and beaten down that you start to actually get somewhere and get some traction and start to see fruits of your effort. Yeah, and he has the benefit of youth, which I don't have. I'm more of a ditch digger when it comes to the I'll show up every day and do the work, but I'm not sure. I'm capable of innovation, but not like him. He's plus he's a scientist. He has a science background. He's got that he's not afraid to sit down and take something apart. And I'm doing less of that these days, which is fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or if somebody's looking at this video going, I don't know about this. I mean, is there anything you'd want to say?
Yeah, I think, in all honesty, probably the LHP is gonna be for, and this is my opinion talking. It's gonna be for a certain sect of people that's gonna require. You're gonna have to hit a lot of prerequisites for belief in order to get to that point, which is sad because it's so dynamic and profound and very, very good at what it proposes it does. I think the stepping stone for that is going to be the empowerment of belief. The prayer book, how to empower your prayer.
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, I made that a prerequisite for the course when I was teaching LHP. That's how that book is so good.
Yeah. It is, and it's one thing that I think people can use, not only in just the daily prayers. I want to teach you how to craft your own.
Yeah.
And once you start to craft your own prayers, you really get an understanding of why things work the way they do and the reasoning behind it through practice. And to me, that is such a bridge for people that are going to want. Okay, you'll be a certain sect that are fine just doing those prayers daily, and that's it. And that's a huge win in my book. But they'll get the people that want more. For those people that want more, that's the LHP. That's where you get to do a deep dive into the nuts and bolts of things. To really, for me, I like to understand things. I want to understand how things work, why they do things they do, and things of that nature. And for me, there's so much material. You just learning the LHP is pretty dynamic in itself and how it works. And then you get into the nuts and bolts of who's healing who and why and how and through time and what the real issues are. I can't look at life the same way now. And it's not just, the LHP. It's just it's like a veil has been lifted, the matrix has been broken, however you want it, whatever analogy fits the bill. It's just like there's truly no going back. And I don't want to live in a state of ignorance. I want to know, for better or worse, what reality is, and this has helped me reach that point. And this goes back to the whole Bloodhound thing. And when a trail goes cold, this hasn't gone cold. This is rung true since I found it, and it continues to ring true. And for me, that's a huge positive reinforcement, validation, whatever you want to call it, that I'm on the right track. I'm where I need to be, because throughout the history of my search and whatever it is, whether it be a job or just trying to find out the truth of something, when it's a lie or it doesn't stick, it doesn't stand up to time. And this has. I'm very thankful for everything that I've been able to learn and bring to myself and my loved ones, and hope that somebody else feels inspired to do the same for themselves, because they are worth it, and so are the people they care about.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you doing this with me, Jason.
Well, thank you for
you're first in line to help me save my YouTube channel. So so I appreciate it. I've been really ambivalent about it because I just I took off with 100. I think it was 100 interviews over the past started about 3 years ago, and I did a lot of interviews. It was like everybody has a story, and I kind of focused on people that were in the secret space program and had memories about that, or people who had been abducted, or people that felt like they were victims of mind control, that kind of thing. People who, in a lot of settings, they wouldn't be believed if they told their story. They'd say, well, you're delusional, you need to be on meds and stuff. I thought, well, I will do a YouTube channel that kind of gives those people a comfortable platform and they could tell their story, let the audience make up their mind whether they're nuts or not, the kind of thing. And we've got a lot of validation over the course of time. But I also had a lot of interviewees in there that were through no fault of their own, spinning a yarn about disclosure and about ETs and about, other dimensions and spirits and entities that they were channeling and all this kind of stuff. And the more I learned from my association with Get Wisdom, I realized that, this is a message that we don't have time to entertain that much anymore. It's dangerous. It's distracting, and it's unfortunately most of it's just in error. It's not true. And there's my channel. Why is this true? So I felt obligated to kind of make it a little bit more on target, and maybe I would lose something in the process by not having all those interviews on there. But the ones that I did have left on there would kind of help people get to the point of things. And so that was my predicament in kind of reviving the interview process, because I want to talk to people like you now. I don't want to talk to... I had some other kind of like high-profile UFO researcher types. They're not willing to entertain what's being presented at Get Wisdom as truth, as what's really happening. And so I feel like I'm between a rock and a hard place right now. So I appreciate you helping me out here.
Absolutely, and there's going to be other people that are like you and I out there that are looking for the truth, and they're looking to find the connecting pieces, because it is time sensitive, and we get stuck in these distractions and these just loops of nonsense, and it's house is on fire.
Right.
Time to step up and start fixing the issue. Because at the end of the day, my priorities have completely changed and brought me more purpose to my life and meaning and happiness.
Great.
And
yeah,
you can still fight the good fight without actually putting yourself in harm's way, and that's what I think a lot of people need to appreciate.
Yeah, that's very true.
Remove the romance of it all and look at it in a practical sense. It's like, you really want to be a martyr? Well, you don't have to be.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Jason, especially, and thank everybody for joining us. I hope you found this video helpful and informative. And you can check us out at getwisdom.com primarily. Secondarily, my website's whyisthistrue.com. And there's some stuff on there you may find interesting. That's the place you would go for the deep subconscious channeling, trauma resolution. If you're interested in the Lightworker Healing Protocol, which comes first, go to getwisdom.com. And there's tons of information there if you want to do like what Jason says, the deep dive. So thanks again, Jason, and I'll be back again with another interview. I've got some lined up. Bye-bye, everyone.
Hi. Thanks, Denny.